Call to order the regular board meeting of September 17th at 7 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be led by the Anchor Bay Junior ROTC. Welcome back and please rise.
Every colors forward march. Post colors. Present arms. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order, arms, ready, face, guide out.
Need a round of applause for the Anchor Bay Junior ROTC. Item 3 is the roll call. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Here.
Treasurer LaFava.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph.
Here.
Trustee Demink.
Here.
Trustee Vosberg. Here. Clerk Barry is here.
Item number 4, presentations. 4A, approve a request by the Department of Public Safety to recognize 5 citizens who assisted with the apprehension of a home invasion suspect. Director Kirschland.
Thank you. We are down to 3 today. 2 of them had football practice, and football is a very important sport. So I'd like to introduce Chase Koningsman. Which one's Chase? Step right here, if you don't mind. Alex Callis. Which one's Alex? Stay right there. I'll get you. Stay right here so that everyone can see you. You can just turn around and face the board. And Galvin Satchemeyer. Am I close? Gavin? Gavin Satchemeyer? Okay. What's that? Did I? All right. I'll try. Listen, your dad's a policeman, right? So, on July 28th of this year, police department received a 911 call of a possible home invasion in progress, and it was through the 24 and Baker neighborhood. As the officers responded, they came across a group of individuals that were willing to help and were witness to the home invasion. They actually pointed out the suspect had taken a bike from one of the garages and was fleeing. The responding units canvassed the neighborhood, searched, looked, and initially came upon this group along with 2 other boys that followed the suspect and relayed back information to where he was headed. He had ran through the parking lot out of Chesterfield subdivision through the woods and into now the city of New Baltimore. With New Baltimore's help and these young individuals who took it upon themselves to not only pay attention, they got description, direction of travel, and then watched him go in and out of certain areas and directed the officers to where they were. The individual was subsequently arrested in the city of New Baltimore as he came out of the woods by both Chesterfield and New Baltimore officers. This is the epitome of what we're trying to raise our kids to. These individuals are great role models at their young age, and with that, our community resolved a group of home invasions that had occurred in that area and was stymieing our investigation until they stepped forward, identified the individual, and pointed them out to responding officers. So with that, I would like to recognize them with our department award. Alex, this is yours. With a letter of recognition and a certificate, and then a department patch. Jason, same thing. letter of appreciation with the certificate. Along with that, we will give you what we call our Chief's Coin of Excellence. This is for performance above and beyond the duty. And with that, we appreciate everything you did for us. So, I present to you these three Oh, okay. If you don't, his brother was also involved. His father's an East Point police officer.
Thank you.
So, can we step up here and take a quick picture, gentlemen?
You're right here in the center of the board. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you. Good job, man.
Thank you. Item 4B, I am going to delay to down in the department reports. Mr. Bunch just walked in the door. Item 4B, a presentation by Chris Bunch, Executive Director of Six Rivers Regional Land Conservancy, on conservancy roles in assisting public agencies.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I would apologize for being late, but apparently I made it. I left Rochester Hills at 6, and the Googler said I would be here 15 minutes early, and look at this. So thanks to our fabulous roads and traffic control here. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes here telling you a little bit about how we assist public agencies in acquiring land. So if we can roll to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. Six Rivers is a private 501c3 nonprofit conservation group. We're made up of donors and supporters and members who share our commitment to conserving land, keeping land in its open and natural and agricultural state, so that we have some of that to enjoy in the region. I usually describe us as a real estate investment corporation. We acquire land and interests in land. We just do it for a little different purpose. We do it for conservation purposes. So you can roll me to the next slide, please. We work in what we describe as the Emerald Crown, the top 5 counties of the metro region, so Oakland, Macomb, Lapeer, Genesee, and St. Clair counties, in the watersheds of the Bell, the Clinton, the Flint, the Huron, the Rouge, and the Shiawassee rivers. So we can go to the next one, and that's a little bit the stars that you see on the map are places where we've protected land. Conservation easements, preserves, properties that we own, and then places where we've done public assists. So the public assists that we're going to talk about tonight are when we come in and pre-acquire a piece of property, we buy it and hold it while you guys, the public agency, goes through a grant funding process and seeks to get a grant to help offset your cost of purchasing the property. So this does a few things. One is that it preserves your eligibility to receive grant funds. You can't get a grant for property that you already own. So typically you're getting a grant for property that you're trying to purchase. It allows us to take the parcel off the market to get it out of harm's way so that you know that it's safe while you go through the grant process, because typically that takes some time. And because we're a private organization, very often we can move a little more quickly than public agencies and public processes can. So what we do in these relationships is that we work directly with the landowner to make the initial purchase, to buy and hold the property. That includes, negotiating with the landowner, securing financing, arranging all of the typical due diligence steps like environmental site assessments and title work and appraisals and so forth. And then we will support the public agency, will support you guys in the grant funding process. So very often people use the apply to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. We know those folks real well. We've done lots of projects in partnership with them. We will testify before the trust fund board. We will, we've done natural resource assessments for the grant applications. There's a lot of different pieces that we've done to support the process. And then we'll assist with arranging the closing of the sale from us to the township when the grant process is concluded. And then the other thing that can happen is when we pre-acquire the property, during the period of time that we own it and you're going through the grant process, we're happy to lease it back to you guys so that you can get the doors open and start using it. So, you know, that can be a lease just for a nominal amount, or it can be a lease for some portion of the purchase price of the property so that you're knocking some of that down while you're waiting for the grant funds to come through. And that's all stuff we can sort out as we go through the process. So let's go to the next slide, please. So all of the process requirements that, that we have are based on what you, the public agency, would require, are based on what the Natural Resources Trust Fund or other funding agencies would require. And pretty much the same thing that you would expect from a bank or anybody else that's going to finance. So there's got to be an environmental site assessment, there's got to be a title search and clear title, there has to be an appraisal. The appraisal has to be done to meet the standards of the Natural Resources Trust Fund or whoever the granting entity is. And in most instances, those entities, if you're getting a grant, will not pay any more than the appraised value. So we won't pay more than appraised value for the piece of property unless our partner in this, unless the public agency says we're willing to go a little above that because we want it. But you know, whatever the result of that is, in no case typically do the funders pay any more than that appraised value. So somebody would have to make up the difference if it's anything over the top. So one of the other things that's required is that we have to have a purchase agreement in hand from the public agency. So from you guys that says that you will cash us out for this property at a date certain, regardless of whether you get the grant or not. And part of the reason for that is that we have to provide security to the lender. So we use the property itself as security, but the lender doesn't want to take the property back. They want to know that they're going to get paid. So we use the property as security, and then we use a purchase agreement that we have with the public agency in hand that says that they'll cash us out, and that satisfies the lender, and they'll loan us the money to go ahead and purchase the property. So we can move on now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about, if we can have the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about, I think, a couple of the projects that we've done. Is there somebody going to push the button? Ah, there we go. So a little bit more about the process. We've worked with the Conservation Fund, which is a national organization that funds these types of transactions and projects. They are also a nonprofit. They have a revolving loan fund that they use to fund acquisitions for conservation and parks. And so we've done several projects with them. The current loan that we have right now is provided at, I think it's 0.75 below prime, so it's at 3.82% is the interest rate. We don't have to make any payments until we close on the sale to you guys, so we purchase the property now, and then there are no payments due until we close on the sale to whoever the entity is that's cashing us out. And then at that point we pay off the principal and the interest. Typically, the loan is for a 2-year term because that allows us the time to get through a grant cycle, and then we have the ability to extend the loan time if we need to in order to go through a second grant cycle if we weren't successful the first time around. And as I explained earlier, the security is the property and the resale contract. So then what happens is whoever the public agency is that we're working with is responsible for all of the costs that go into us acquiring the property at the front end, all of our holding costs, and then all of the costs of selling the property to you guys at the end of the grant period. And so that's all of those due diligence costs at the front end. It's the transaction costs, so you know, the title search, the closing costs, the property taxes, all of the typical things that happen in a real estate closing. We get a facilitation fee for working on this, and we negotiate those based on each and every project because each project is different. The project we're in the midst of right now, the facilitation fee is $30,000. The last one we closed, the facilitation fee was $11,000. So it sort of depends on how heavy a lift the project is going to be. And then, of course, all the holding costs, which include loan interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and upkeep of the property during the time period. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we would, however, lease the property back to you guys immediately so that you could start using it for whatever purposes you wanted to during the time that we're holding on to it. So now we can go ahead one more. So this is a little bit of what it looks like. So this is a project we closed a couple of years ago. We acquired a piece for St. Clair County Parks. It was an expansion of their Goodles Park. The parcel that's outlined in the red there is the piece that we bought. As you can see, it's adjacent to Goodles Park. It was about 30 acres of former ag land. It could have been turned into a subdivision. The park did not want that incompatible use next door, and they wanted to expand the boundaries of the park. So we went out and pre-acquired it and held it while they went through a natural resources trust fund process. So you can move on to the next slide, please. So this is sort of how that project worked out by the numbers. The appraised value of the property was $220,000. The total cost to the parks when they closed the whole deal and took possession of the property was $103,000. So that included all of the costs. The only thing that I don't have in there are the due diligence costs, which they did at the front end. They did their own appraisal and they did their own environmental site assessment. So I don't have the numbers on what that was. But the total cost to them of working with us, of going through the process with us, was $23,000. And that included both our facilitation fee and then all of the transaction costs on both transactions, the one where we purchased it and then the one where they purchased it from us. So they paid $23,000 to work through the process with us. But they got a grant for $100,000. So what they ended up doing was their total out-of-pocket cost was $103,000 for a $220,000 piece of property. So the $23,000 they paid us allowed them to bring in $100,000 to the community. And that's basically how that one worked out. And the facilitation fee on that one was $21,000. I think all of the transaction costs, the total assist cost was $23,000, including the facilitation fee. So the transaction costs on both sides were $13,000. So we can go on to the next slide. I'll show you another one. This one we just closed late last year and had the grand opening back in this spring. We purchased a piece for Casco Township, which is also up in St. Clair County. It had about a quarter mile of frontage on the Bell River. It was a 20-acre parcel, and it is the township's first park. It is the Casco Township Bell River Park and kayak launch. The launch is yet to come, but the park is now open to the public. So you can go to the next slide, and again, by the numbers, the appraised value on this one was $230,000. The township, in this case, only paid a total of $37,000 for the property. And that's because they actually got a larger grant than County Parks did, and because County Parks provided some of the local match requirement. So the township bought a $230,000 piece of property for $37,000 out of their pockets. And their total cost for doing that with us, for working with us to do it, including all of the holding costs and transaction costs and the facilitation fee, was $33,000. So it cost them $33,000 to save almost $200,000. So it was, it was well worth it for them. So same type of thing can work out for you guys if you have an acquisition that you want to do, where we would go in and negotiate the purchase and pre-acquire it and hold it. We would have to have a purchase agreement with you guys in order to get the financing, and then we would hold it while you go through Natural Resources Trust Fund process, and there are other funding sources out there as well. Typically, when you go through those grant processes, the grant will be for somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of the purchase price of the property. So you should be able to walk away paying somewhere between 25 and 50% of the full fair market value, depending on how you set up the grant and what the end result is. So I think that's my description of how it works. I don't think I have any more slides on this, but I would be happy. Oh, well, the one we're in the middle of right now is with Macomb Township. So we purchased and actually own a piece on their behalf right now, and they have a trust fund grant in right now. They applied, the trust fund application went in, the deadline was April 1 for the application to go in. Decision will be this December. We own the property. We closed on the purchase in August. This one actually worked a little different than the other two because they had the application in before we bought the property. But we're holding the property and sitting on it. The purchase price is $1.2 million. So the grant application is $1.25 million because they're going to get some of their transaction costs out of it. Assuming that they're awarded the grant, their local match portion will be $312,500, and the grant will be for $987,000. So after they pay the interest and the appraisal fees and the due diligence, the transaction costs, and so forth, they'll have roughly $400,000 into it. You know, I don't know what the transaction costs on the back end will be. But they'll be similar to what they were on the front end. They've got $49,000 into it right now, so they might have another, I would say, $30,000 into it because they won't have to. I'm sure we won't have to do environmental site assessment or appraisal or any of those things on the back end of it because we've already done those. You know, they'll have roughly $400,000 into a $1.2 million piece of property. So they will add that to their parkland and to their community for a third of the market value. So that one we hope to button up next year. Trust fund decision will be in December. Then you have to wait until the following year for the legislature to appropriate the funds. That typically happens in the spring. Trust fund typically gets the grant contracts out early summer, and then you can move forward with closing the deal. So for Macomb Township, assuming that they're successful with the grant, they should actually own the property sometime next fall. In the meantime, we own it, and they're taking care of it, and we haven't finished the lease agreement yet, but that'll be signed, and they'll open it to the public sometime within the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Thank you. Just for the board's information, I did request that Six Rivers and Mr. Bunch come to and present this to our board. We have had some discussions individually on some specific parcels. As we are updating our Parks and Rec master plan, you will see me present what I believe are some pretty strategic pieces of property located, without giving away the locations, near our vital waterways that I think are going to be best used long-term as recreational and conservation pieces. And this will just be another tool in our toolbox as we make decisions on acquiring some property for recreation. Any questions from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you, Chris, for being here. At the end of that transaction, the ones you described where you'll buy it up front and then sell it back to us, do you keep a conservation easement on the property?
You know, we have chosen not to do that in the ones that we've done so far because Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, when they fund a project, then it requires that there be restrictions on the property. It can't be sold. The use can't be converted from natural area or parkland. It's really hard to do that with something that the trust fund funded. So we choose, what we've decided is that a conservation easement is extraneous. It's too much extra work. There's no reason to do it if it's already controlled because you got a grant from the state that requires you to keep it that way.
Okay, so it keeps the same type of use. Do you still do the program where if an individual property owner had property that they did not want to see developed, could turn it over?
Sure, yeah, we take, you know, the bulk of our work is conservation easements with individual landowners, or acquisition of nature preserves. Some people donate their land to be a preserve. We're working on one of those right now. You know, we're working on several conservation easement donations. So that's you know, the meat and potatoes of our work. But these projects have started to produce some good results for the communities we work in, allowing them to add some parkland and save some money and access Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars. So, you know, we like to do whatever we can to help out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Any further
Supervisor.
comments from the board? Thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me.
Moving on to department reports. Any departments wish to update the board or the public?
Good evening, Board. Just two quick things. Number one is the limestone program this year is completed. We've had 25 Mile Road between County Line and Baker Road. Then we had Baker between Washington and 25 Mile Road completed, as well as Maurice and Schuer Road. So those roads were completed this year, and there are pictures for before and after, which I'm sure we will share with you. Second thing is we're getting some calls in about residents wanting to remove their sandbags from their properties. So I know the lake levels dropped probably 7-8 inches from its highest point. We're recommending that people keep the sandbags on their property because it is still higher than now than it was at the same time last year. So potentially in April it could potentially get worse. So we recommend keeping the sandbags on their property over the winter, see what happens next spring, and then we'll go from there. If residents have questions, they can call DPW at 949-0400, extension 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further departments? One real quick from the supervisor's office, the Southeast Veterans Facility is going very well. You'll see a ton of activity between Donner and Sugarbush. It is impressive the amount of resources the state of Michigan is throwing at that construction project. It is on schedule. If anything, it's a little ahead of schedule to be complete January 2021. To extend on what Assistant Director Johnson said as well regarding lake levels, there was a meeting last week in St. Clair County where they tried to estimate what's going to happen in 2020, and the prediction is we're not at the peak yet, so we could actually see a little additional rise next year. It's too early to get a really solid estimate because of all of the variables. It's how much lake, the temperature, the precipitation this winter, how much of our lake gets covered with ice and snow, but the lake levels could actually continue to rise. There are a number of plugs in storm sewer that our DPW will be addressing as we move forward, but the lake level issue is not completely over, and we are still on it. Even though it's gone down right now, we will be walking strategic areas in the township again with the Army Corps this fall. And that's it for my reports right now. Clerk's office.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Clerk's office has just a brief report as well. The upcoming November 5th election in Chesterfield, if you live in the Anchor Bay School District, you do have an election this year. Absent voter ballots will be available for that election on September 21st. If you would like to request an absentee ballot for that election, if you live in the Anchor Bay School District, you may request it from the clerk's office. You must submit an application for an absentee ballot or a written request for an absentee ballot to us before we can issue your ballot. Ballots for the general mass mailing for those who have requested an absentee ballot will occur after September the 21st. You may also register for that election up to and until and including Election Day. If you register on Election Day in the clerk's office, you may either obtain an absentee ballot that is voted in the clerk's office, or once you register at the clerk's office, you may proceed to your precinct location to vote in person. Thank you.
Anything from the treasurer's office tonight? Trustees for subcommittee reports. Trustee Domingue.
Quick from the library, currently there's a vacancy on the Chesterfield Township Library Board of Trustees. Per the bylaws, the board will appoint a resident to fill the term of office left to serve. This appointment will carry through Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. If you are interested in serving on the library board, please submit a letter of interest to the library director, Elizabeth Madsen, prior to the September 18th, 2019 meeting. Next is from Parks and Rec, getting this out of the way tonight early, the new form. Soon to be fall color season led by the Macomb County Master Gardeners and Chesterfield Beautification Committee. Our popular tours are back. Mark your calendars for this cost-free community enriching event and sign up for while space remains. Thursday, October 17th or Friday, October 18th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Choice is up to you. Lunch is provided. Join us for a number of fall fun trips this fall. We take care of the transportation so you can relax and enjoy the experience. Register early and avoid the long waiting list. This season's trips include Disney on Ice, Terror on Tilson Street, Parade Company Tour, Jurassic World Live, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and A Christmas Carol. Visit the Parks and Rec website for details. Registration is also underway for the fall activities, youth basketball leagues, Halloween happenings, adult fitness, youth classes, bus trips, cost-free enriching opportunities, one-day special events, and so much more. You can count on us to get you out and about in your hometown. You can contact Parks and Rec for further information. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Any further reports on subcommittees? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, just I kind of like this new format. I was going to include this in my board comments, but the Selfridge Sustainability Study Committee that I was appointed to, along with Mr. Lafata and I believe Mr. Palin and Mr. Arroyo, there has been no formal movement that I've been aware of regarding the sustainability study, but there has been some meetings taking place regarding the possible F-35A coming to Selfridge. And the most recent meeting had to do with something called the Environmental Impact Study, and it does meticulously lay out all of the environmental concerns associated with. I'm not prepared to really update you fully on that report. I would like to hear from the economic development team, perhaps maybe Ms. Rad from the county, and get a better understanding of what the next sustainability study meeting will take place, and we can learn a little bit more collaboratively with some of the other players. But there is some movement with regard to an evaluation of the environmental impact, and I will work with Mr. Lafata and our planning department to provide the residents with a more formal sort of explanation about what's happening at Selfridge. So that's all I had to report tonight.
Thank you. Trustee Anderson.
Okay. This September 21st, this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Sunday the 22nd from 10 in the morning to 3, the Heritage Days will be held over at our historical village. Enjoy horse rides, photos, and games, a kids tent, rope making, corn grinding, Miss Vosberg making candles, scavenger hunt, craft show, and classic car show. Food and drink will be available for purchase. Entrance fee is a donation of $1 per person or $2 for family. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. Item 6, all items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no discussion, separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda are permitted. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Clerk Berry.
Support.
Support by Trustee Vosberg. Discussion. Comments from the public. Public comments are permitted on the consent agenda, which include the minutes of the regular board meeting, approval of the agenda, and approval of the payment of bills. Seeing no comments, motion by Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Vosberg to approve the consent agenda. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Lafata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye. Motion passes. Item 7 is a public hearing. We do have 2 of them tonight. 7A, conduct a public hearing to review the special assessment roll and to hear any objections thereto for the proposed Meadow Lane Paving Special Assessment District. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Motion by trustee Domingue.
Support.
Support by trustee Joseph. The public hearing is opened. This is a public hearing. If you would like to address the board, please state your name and address for the record and have at it. I think probably know what it's all about. This is the paving of Meadow Lane. Going once, going twice. Seeing no public comments on the public hearing, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Joseph, support by trustee Domingue. To close the public hearing. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
The public hearing is closed. 7B, conduct a public hearing to hear comments on an application for an Industrial Facilities Exemption Certificate, I.F.E.C, as submitted by Arnold Tool and Die for real property located at 48800 Structural Drive, Chesterfield, Michigan. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Motion by Clerk Barry.
Support.
Support by trustee Domingue to open the public hearing. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye. The public hearing is hereby open. There will be an agenda item on this, both of these items as well, once we get to the regular agenda. Welcome.
Good evening, Gary Enlock on behalf of Arnold Tool. We submitted this application for tax abatement. I just want to give you a little history of Arnold Tool. Tom McKay's here, he and his wife own it. Tom's owned it since 1976. It started off in Clemens, then it moved to the township. And then they moved to a facility at 48200 Industrial Drive in Chesterfield in 1976. Or, excuse me, 1979. And he rented there for 23 years. The building got sold out from under him by the group that owned it for those 23 years without any notice to him. He was of the belief that he extended his lease for an additional 5 years. The new owners wanted him out. They sued us in circuit court. The matter was referred to the retired Wayne County Supervisor Ryan for facilitation. Through that process, we got additional time frame to stay there with an increased rent. And then we explored relocating because we knew eventually either Judge Ryan or Judge Viviano were going to make them move from this facility. They looked at a vacant piece of property at 826 Mile Road in Arnold Township. They wanted to stay in Chesterfield. There was 3 vacant lots. Again, there was industrial park on 22 Mile Road. They made arrangements with Chesterfield 5 LLC, the owner, to go through the site plan process. We did that. We had to get a variance from the ZBA, even though it was owned heavy industrial. They have very large presses because of the vicinity of homes across, there's 3 homes across 22 Mile Road. The ZBA granted us that variance. They have 25 employees, 2 that live in Chesterfield, 3 in Macomb Township, 3 in St. Clair Township, 2 in Richmond, 2 in Mount Clemens, 2 in Lexington, St. Clair Shores 1, Columbus Township 1, Troy 1, Clinton Township 1, Oxford 1, Casco 1, Romeo 1, Shawnee Township 1, Warren 1, Lennox 1, and Roseville 1. Tom was concerned that if he moved to Ira Township, that some of these people that have been with him for more than 20 years would not make the move. And in an industrial facility, you need the skills of your longtime employees to make good quality products on a regular basis. So they decided to stay in Chesterfield. We went through that process, and eventually we got site plan approval. Then we had to go through engineering. Eventually we got a soil erosion permit from the county. Foundation permit was issued on October 16, 2018. The building permit was issued on March 15, 2019. We applied for this application on August 6, 2019. request and did obtain some of those documents that were pertinent to this situation. It's our position, because the assessor wrote a report indicating that our application wasn't timely, basically referencing the statute MCL 207559, parent 2, parent small c. And I should have included in that report the statute itself, so I made copies that I'd like to distribute to you. Is that okay, Mr. Supervisor?
You may. Maybe hand them right to Trustee DeMake, and he'll hand them down to us.
Section that's referenced is at the very bottom of that page in the left column. It says for applications made after December 31st, 1983, the commencement of the restoration, replacement, or construction of the facility occurred not earlier than 6 months before the filing of the application for the Industrial Facilities Exemption certificate. It says not earlier, and so it's our position that we filed in a timely fashion because we had to September 15, 2019 to make the application. We filed it August 8th within that deadline time frame. It doesn't say not later than, it says not earlier than. And it's our position that you have to take a common sense approach in reviewing this because not until March 15, 2019 could my clients erect their facility. Once you get a soil erosion permit from the county, you can do some land balancing and things of that nature. And in the process in Chesterfield, it's been my experience that after you get the soil erosion permit, you're still going through engineering review. But to help expedite the building process, especially in the fall and in the winter, that the building department, after a certain amount of engineering review has occurred, grants you the permit to start putting your foundation, which includes land balancing, drainage, soil, compacting it in place. This particular piece of property, the 3 lots, the grade of it at the street level was basically at street level. As you go to the east towards the railroad tracks, there was a drop off of 3 to 4 feet. So our contractor had to put in a lot more fill than one would normally expect because the rest of the subdivision was built out. There was a storm sewer system in place, a detention basin, and that was another reason why Tom wanted to stay in this area. Besides, it was in close proximity to his employees and his customers. So we say that not until March 15, 2019, we actually commenced the construction of the facility. And so I think we did it in a timely fashion. And it exercised common sense to me in case that's a critical date. Because if we started erecting a building before March 15, your code enforcement officer or somebody from the building department would have been out there saying, we're giving you a ticket for building a building without a permit. And you can get preliminary permits, but the critical permit is the building permit. And when I filed the application, I attached a copy of it so that the staff could see when the permit was issued. So we needed to approve the application for this abatement. The statute says the maximum abatement time is 12 months. I didn't see anything in the report as to, it does say that the board has to make a decision as to approval or denial. It didn't say as to a recommendation for the length of time. But part of the statute says that one of the goals behind the statute is to retain employment. By staying here in Chesterfield in the community. You did enhance your tax base because before you had 3 vacant industrial parcels. Now you have those 3 were combined with the assessment department and a new building. My clients took possession and turned the keys over to the old place last Friday, September 13th. So we're just asking for some common sense relief that they exercise their economic discretion in staying in your community for the benefit of your community and their employees. And if you had any questions, I try to answer.
Any further comments from the public? This is the public hearing portion. There will be an agenda item on this, on the regular agenda, where we can go back and forth with some questions and answers.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Motion by trustee Joseph, close the public hearing, supported by trustee Demink. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Public hearing is closed at 7:47 p.m. Item 8, regular agenda. 8A, adopt resolution 2019-32, number 5, for Meadow Lane Paving Special Assessment District, confirming the special assessment role and providing for the collection of annual installments for a 10-year period. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Joseph, support by trustee Vosberg. Discussion. Comments from the public. One quick comment from myself. This has been a long process. There was one more step, and that would be the Macomb County Board of Commissioners will have this at their September 26th board meeting for approval for construction this fall. Any comments from the public? Comments from the board? Motion by trustee Joseph, support by trustee Vosberg. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8B, consider a request for an Industrial Facilities Exemption certificate for real property submitted by Arnold Tool and Die, located at 48800 Structural Drive, Chesterfield, Michigan. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, hold on. You've actually
What's the recommendation?
you've got 2 resolutions in front of you. One of them is a resolution to approve, number 33A, and one is a resolution to disapprove, or we can just open it up for discussion.
I'll use resolution A to approve. What's the recommendation for the years?
Is
Clerk Berry.
Recommendation would be for 8 years according to our current criteria.
And I want support before we go back and forth any
Support.
further. Motion by trustee Demink, support by trustee Vosberg. And 8 years would be filled into the blanks under resolution 2019-33A. Discussion.
Just some clarification. The correspondence included in our packet indicates that our township attorney is in concurrence with our township assessor, Mr. Babb, that this board disapprove, not approve this motion. And there was an additional question I had with regard to the correspondence in our packet regarding proper posting and a communication between our clerk and our clerk's department. And so I'd like some clarification on that. The correspondence indicates that the publication looks appropriate, but in order to be in compliance, the posting would need to appear in the paper no later than 9/10/2019. And this was not published, according to the packet, until September 11th. So I want to make sure that we have properly posted this, and any communication explanation regarding the legal opinion from Mr. Siebert as well as Mr. Babb, if the board could be enlightened in that area.
Mr. Siebert?
I can't speak to when the publication was posted and noticed, but the statute must be specifically complied with. If there is a notice defect, I'm not aware of it. I was not included in that chain. With respect to whether or not they qualify, the statute is specific, and it indicates that except for speculative buildings, which this is not, the the legislative body of the local unit shall not approve an application, and the State Tax Commission shall not grant an I.F.E.C. unless the applicant satisfies all of the following. And one of those criteria is that the commencement of construction of the facility, which doesn't mean land balancing, facility refers to the structure itself, occurred earlier than 6 months before the filing of the application for the certificate. So there's only 2 dates that are relevant. It's not when the building permit is issued. The only 2 dates that are relevant is when commencement of construction of the facility occurred and when the application was filed. If the board deems the work that was done to be construction of the facility, and that occurred more than 6 months before the application was filed with the township, the statute prohibits the township from approving it, and I think if you approved it, the State Tax Commission could still, I know they could still deny it. Mr. Babb, the assessor, contacted me on this. He said, again, I don't know what the facts are, I'm relying on his research, that the application was submitted on such and such a date and that construction occurred more than 6 months. Pouring the footings, if you're deemed that to be construction, and Mr. Babb and I both did, that would be deemed construction and it would be disqualified. If the board, on the other hand, is of the opinion that the digging of trenches and the construction of the foundation is really de minimis and that the statute envisions something more substantial, then that would be your interpretation. Of course, the statute does not define what they mean by construction. They never do. Sometimes they do, but in this one they don't. And so there is an argument to be made whether construction means something more than just putting in the foundation. So I tend to agree, not tend to, I do agree with your assessor. I deem the word commencement of construction to mean its ordinary term. The courts always interpret statutes to give it their ordinary meaning, and pouring footings to me is the commencement of a building. But if the board disagrees,
Mr. Acciavatti, I would just make one final comment with that clarification from our attorney. Not only do I think we should follow the direction of our township assessor, but also our attorney, and that I would be very concerned with the interpretation of what we consider construction and the ramifications it has and the potential hardship it places on the building department and the planning when you have certain processes that have to be in place for permits to be issued. And so when we start changing what we define as construction, I wonder what that would do to our ordinance. And in this case, I think the statute is very clear, and I think we should simply follow it. We have an attorney and we have an assessor, and I rely on them, and in their when they concur, I don't know what authority the board would have other than to sort of make a very narrow definition of construction, and I don't think that's wise.
Thank you. Trustee Vosburgh.
I have a question. Why is this before us then on the agenda if it did not fulfill the requirements?
Because the applicant always has an opportunity to come to the board, as Mr. Gendernalic has on behalf of his client, and argue why the statute has been satisfied. I mean,
Okay.
so the fact that an internal department deems an application to be insufficient is not a basis to preclude them from coming before the board and having their opportunity to convince the board otherwise.
So even though the applicant who had a business here, and then they built a new building to keep the business here.
That's not the issue that's before the board. The board is whether or not they started construction of the new facility more than 6 months before the application was filed. Those are the only 2 dates you have to worry about.
Right. I withdraw my support.
Hold on one second. I'll support your motion, Trustee Domingo. So, wait a minute. Let's just clear the. Let's clear the floor of that of the motion. Motion
Why don't we
to
just clear the floor of the whole?
Motion to clear the floor.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay. Let's just withdraw. I will make a motion to pass Resolution 2019-33A, approving the application for Arnold Tool and Die for Industrial Facilities Exemption Certificate. Is there support?
Could you restate the motion? I misunderstood or didn't hear it properly.
Resolution number 2019-33A, which is the resolution approving application for Arnold Tool and Die for Industrial Facilities Exemption Certificate. Is there support?
Second?
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, second by Clerk Barry.
Just for clarity, what's the difference between that motion and the motion that was
Well,
just withdrawn?
It's the exact same motion, but we can now discuss the issue because there's a motion on the floor.
Okay.
We're right where we were to begin with.
I see.
This, I have a question for Mr. Seibert. Regardless, the end of the line here is the tax tribunal. So the state of Michigan sees these time and time again, and they are ultimately will make a decision if the homestead portion of the taxes will be abated for this purpose or not. This is a formal step. So the approval or denial, they go to the state tax tribunal, who's ultimately going to make this decision.
If you approve it, it'll go to Lansing, and somebody at Lansing is going to look at it, and if they make a determination that commencement of construction was more than 6 months before the application was filed, they'll deny it. So,
And then it doesn't go through either way.
the tax commission makes the final decision.
Correct. Treasurer Lafata.
If we deny the appeal, they can still appeal, they can appeal to...
They can go to the state tax commission, as I understand it. And I'm assuming the board believes that all the other criteria, and Mr. Babb believes that all the other criteria have been satisfied. This is the only interpretation. So, again, I don't represent private companies going to the tax tribunal, but I would believe that not the tax tribunal, the tax commission would have the ability to approve it if they think that we got it wrong.
Okay, thank you.
So it's up to them in Lansing at Track. If they're going to approve it, we can approve it, and they can still shoot it down.
Yeah.
And
You would argue it up there.
Mr. Supervisor, is the other, also, if we turn it down, if we do Resolution 33B, that will give them the right to go and appeal?
The only basis for our denial is that 6-month rule. And I don't represent private companies going to the tax commission, but I would believe that since the tax commission has the final authority, if Mr. Gendernal can convince the tax commission that the 6 months was satisfied, that ultimately they would make that decision. There's other criteria that must be approved, but that wasn't one that concerned your assessor.
Sure.
So this is it's the equivalent of a statute of limitations in a lawsuit.
But if we do nothing, then...
You have to do something.
We have to do something, because if we do nothing, the party is stuck.
It'll be, yes, you have to make a decision,
Okay.
up or down.
Any further discussion? Any comments from the public?
I would just say, it doesn't say what Mr. Seibert says, from my perspective. It says construction of the facility occurred not earlier than 6 months before the filing of the application. And there, the idea is you can't file too soon. You can't file until you're in construction mode, so to speak, because otherwise it becomes a speculative request. And like Mr. Seibert and I, we didn't write the statute, but we have different interpretations. But a lot of times it says, before this date or after this date, but it says not earlier. So the legislature, for some reason, used that language, and they said, as to the filing of the application. So we didn't do it earlier than we started construction. And we didn't start constructing the buildings until after March 15th of 2019, when we got a permit to do that. And the other is, as Robert said, de minimis as to moving some dirt around. And if you drove by there in that time frame before March 15th, you didn't see a facility. You just saw dirt, and you wouldn't have seen the foundation because it's underground.
Thank you. Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Clerk Berry, to approve Resolution 2019-33A, 8 years in the years and the terms inserted into the resolution. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye. Let Lansing figure it out.
Trustee Vosberg.
Yeah, aye.
Treasurer Lafata. No.
That's all you're doing?
Motion's adopted.
Attorney and your
Item number 8C, approve the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 178, amending Chapter 30, Engineering Design Standards, Article 6, grading, site drainage, and sidewalk, Section 30-155 sidewalk standards, amending repair and maintenance requirements, and creating a fund for the deferment of sidewalk construction. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt ordinance number 178 as stated.
Motion by Clerk Barry, support by Supervisor Acciavatti. This is second reading. We did have a bit of a discussion last year, or last meeting, on this ordinance amendment. Director Palin, you should have gotten a letter from him, from the director in support of explaining this item. Just to be real clear, currently our ordinance states development comes through, sidewalk goes in. The developer has a couple different options, and we haven't done a real solid job backing up 30, 40 years. Hence, we have a whole lot of sidewalk gaps. So option 1, put sidewalk in. Option 2, apply for a variance first through the ZBA and then to this board. With this amendment, we create another option. So they'll still have the option to put the sidewalk in. They still, under an extreme circumstance, will be able to come to the board for a variance. And the third option would be to deposit funds into a sidewalk deferment fund so that we as a township can start tackling some of the tremendous amount of sidewalk gaps that we have throughout our community. Any comments from the board or the public?
So they can still go to ZBA and ask that a sidewalk not be put in if it would be.
Because the current sidewalk ordinance falls under two areas. One, the zoning, and two, an engineering standard. They have to get a variance from two different spots. One would be the ZBA, and the second is this board, which we have had some in front of this board in the past. Moving forward, we would expect them only to come in front of this board once the ZBA gets, the code gets
Still have to go in
cleared
front of
out.
Hank and the ZBA.
No, they'll be coming in front of here and Hank for now.
Then comes the public.
That's correct. Just like in the past. It's another option for the developer. Treasurer LaFata. I thought you had one. Any further? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, just one comment regarding this. As I mentioned when we talked about it for the first reading, sitting on the Planning Commission and watching entrepreneurs that come to the board with a request for a site plan, and you can see some of these individuals put everything they absolutely have, and to layer it with sidewalks, and sidewalks are important, and I do appreciate the attempt to address some of the gaps. The concern is, in some instances, these businesses are out in the middle of very remote parts of the township where there is no pedestrian traffic and there is no subdivision, there is no foot traffic to their business. So the one that I mentioned at the last time we discussed this was a extreme north end of the township, and it was an attempt to bring some life back into an area that's now being used as a car lot. And the petitioner indicated that he would be more than willing to put sidewalks in and make it a condition of his approval if there was any reasonable likelihood that there would be pedestrian traffic. And his point was, I can put it anywhere you want on my property, but it ends in a field. So there's nothing next to me, and there are no houses, and there are no residents. There are no kids trying to traverse my property to get to a school, and it was an undue hardship on this business. So to say to him, we want to have a continuous path, I understand, but let's make it appropriate as his business grows and the subdivision comes in around him. The condition of his permit was, or to be able to move forward on his site, was that when the neighborhood comes in, he puts the sidewalk in. It's a good measure, and it doesn't keep small businesses who are trying to make a go of something from being saddled with costs and costs and costs and costs. I think this creates an undue hardship, and you can't even get relief during the normal protocol. This ordinance would require the board to come in, and it just seems very heavy-handed on small businesses. The big guys don't care. They'll put in sidewalks all day. It's not a burden to them. But it's the small business owner that gets jammed up here, and that's why I can't support it. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Let's bring it up to the, public.
Public, Gary Ginnerlock, I live here in the township. It's great to have sidewalks connected. It's good to have this discussion. With the follow-up of what Mr. Joseph said, I represented that used car dealership on New Haven Road. We have a vacant agricultural piece next to us. Then we have a farm. And to the right of us, we have a piece owned by Detroit Edison with a 24-inch gas main to it. And then we have Pollard Park. When the township built Pollard Park, they didn't extend the sidewalk to their farm perimeter. They didn't extend the water main to their farm perimeter. And they didn't extend the sanitary sewer. When they acquired the property, I think it was from a ConnDOT, because that was supposed to be, I believe, an exit route from I-94 as we were traveling west. But here in cable TV wanted to put up a tower in a different location, and I think the county and the state, everybody got together, the township got Pollard Park, the tower went up there, there's no ramp, there's the park, then eventually the sanitary sewer came across, and the water main to facilitate better use of the park. So the farm and the car dealership, we entered into a written agreement that was recorded that says when our neighbors build the sidewalk, the current property owner or the future property owner has to put in the sidewalk. Now, I think that's a reasonable resolution, but if this new ordinance precludes that possibility, when you say to the property owner, you either build a sidewalk now for, let's say, $1,000, or you put $1,000 into escrow with the township. Either way, it's the $1,000 coming out of their pocket at this point in time, and the sidewalk, if they put it in now, leads to nowhere. And if you use $1,000 in the future, well, then they don't have to pay it, but it's still coming out of their current cash flow. But I think you still have to leave the options open, because like say by way of illustration, out here in Jefferson, when that was built in the 60s and 70s, all those individual homes, nobody put sidewalks in. The only way you're going to have sidewalks in that part of the community is by the extension of the bike trail, and if you get monies from other communities or other funds, and you either decide to build it on the north or the south side of Jefferson. I know my time's up, right?
Thank you. I
think you got to have flexibility.
I just want to be very clear. Yes, we still have all the flexibility that we have. The only new tool that this will give is an option to, instead of placing the sidewalk in these tough areas, to defer that and deposit funds into a sidewalk fund. Now, the goal from my end is really simple. Trying to put all these agreements back together from the last 30, 40 years, there's a sidewalk here, a gap here, a sidewalk here, a gap here, when I'm just trying to connect the schools and connect our parks and our township. And when you look at the 20, 30 miles of sidewalk, we just had 2,000 foot at over $200,000 that we're going to be dealing with. This is a tremendous burden. And this is where we ended up. It's one more tool. We still have the option for a variance from this board. We still have the option, just like we did with an agreement, if this board and the planning commission still deals with that. Everything's in place except for an additional option to jumpstart a sidewalk fund so we can start closing some gaps. Treasurer LaFata.
Can I just add one thing to that?
You had like 15 seconds left in your comment, so if you're quick, Councilor.
Grace Assisted Living in the Aspen former Chesterfield Farm. They just put the sidewalk in front of the nursing home, assisted living, and they stopped 24 feet from the apartment complex, and there's a ton of people that walk 23 Mile Road on that side. And why wasn't there some coordination between Grace, our building department, and the giant apartment complex to put in that 26 feet?
Thank you. There's a ton of these old arrangements out there, and to unravel them is a disaster, and that's exactly the problem that we are looking to solve. Treasurer LaFata.
Thank you.
I just have a question on this fund that we're going to start. Mr. Jen and Alex says that somebody puts $1,000 in a fund, say in 2019, and the sidewalk doesn't get built until 2022. and $1,000 that it cost in 2019 is now $1,500. How do we deal with that?
Thank you. Any further comments? I'm not sure who your question was addressed to. It's the township's decision. So this is a tool that we
we're
have.
doing something. Shouldn't we understand what we're doing before we run into it? I mean, it's an easy question.
We do understand what we're doing.
Does the township put in the other 500, or we don't build the sidewalk? I mean, it's an easy question.
Well, I'm going to give you I will give you an answer as soon as you
we should know that before we go ahead and approve this.
We
what
do know
we're
that.
doing when we
You don't
move
know
forward.
that.
This is a good question, and it needs an answer before it goes to a vote.
We do know that.
In other words, you don't know then.
Yes, we do. Just
What's the answer?
ask the question very clearly.
Okay, so in 2019, somebody puts, based on square footage of the sidewalk, $1,000 in our fund. Only the sidewalk doesn't get built until 2022, and everybody knows there's inflation, cost of cement goes up, cost of labor goes up. So in 2022, it doesn't cost $1,000, it costs $1,500. Where does the other 500 come from?
If a development, and these are going to be rare. You pointed out a couple of them. Maybe they're up and down Jefferson. If a development is deemed by Planning Commission to the sidewalk here doesn't make sense. If they did, I'm going to answer your question. Let me explain to you what happens here. Right now, they have one of two options. One is a variance to get rid of that requirement altogether, which we have all over the township. Hence, we have sidewalk gaps all over the township. So this option will say deposit X amount of dollars. The contractor will give a price, just like with there's numbers there. It's $5 a square foot right now. Looked at by the engineer. Deposit this amount of money, and you are done with your sidewalk. Your sidewalk responsibility. So now you fast forward to, say, Hobart or some place where we know there's not going to be development for 25 years, which is what we have right now, where there's no sidewalks in places that were built 25 years ago. All I know for sure is right now we have no money in a sidewalk fund to start tackling this and to start matching for grants and to start dealing with the 20, 30 miles of sidewalk and non-motorized paths we need. And we still have no opportunity to get that individual to fix his sidewalk. So the township is responsible for it, just like we are today. So the only difference is now we have pot of money to start fixing the problem here.
The township is not responsible for it today. The homeowner is responsible for it. The township is not.
There's where you disagree.
What's gonna happen?
There's a ton of these around town. Drive from here to from our township, and you're going to see a lot of gap projects brought here.
If you look at somebody build a house, or they build a commercial facility, if they have to put a sidewalk in, they're responsible for it. What we're going to do is you're going to try and create a fund that at some point in time the township's going to have liability.
We disagree on what the meaning of this is.
No, the township's going to...
Those sidewalks go in. We don't need to debate back and forth here. You and I can do that.
Well, it's not a debate back and forth. It's the fact that we're entering into a change in our ordinance that's going to open the township up to financial liability. It's as simple as that. And they still have options. I'm not understanding this. It doesn't sound like a good one unless we plan on using somebody's money to do something else before they decide that they want to put the sidewalk in. It doesn't make sense.
I understand that you don't get it. Any further comments from the board?
Yeah, I have an additional comment.
Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, the question that Treasurer LaFata asked is contained in the ordinance, and the funds are based on the current unit price. So the construction of the cost, according to the ordinance draft, is in the second reading, is that the funds are based on the current unit price. So if the price of the unit price goes up, you can only use the funds that the individual put in. The other thing that's problematic here is a statement about everything else stays in place. And the ordinance itself addresses that, and it says in section 2 that all resolution, ordinances, or parts thereof, to the extent that are in conflict, are hereby repealed. So I don't see that there's all this flexibility. And the other area that is of really concern is in the case that Mr. Gendernalik pointed out. The individual puts the money in the fund, and if the township believes that the monies in the fund can be used elsewhere, then the township has the ability to use those monies as they see fit. So the board then takes from the original property owner who's supposed to put sidewalk there and can utilize that fund to replace sidewalk areas in other places if the board deems necessary according to the existing ordinance. And that, I think, is a massive, change. And so talking about kids going to school and all of that kind of thing is great. It sounds good, and most people will go, oh, that makes perfect sense. I want kids to be able to go to school. But in the case example that was proposed by the attorney that represented the business owner, there's no school, there's no residential, there's no pedestrian traffic. It's a business out in the middle of nowhere that would stay a field were it not for this entrepreneur that came forward and tried to make something of it. To shake him down and say, put some money into a fund because we got a problem with sustainable paths around somewhere else, and we'll use it however we want, is not getting kids to school. And it's a misrepresentation. And the same relief that's available is not what's being proposed. It's being withdrawn, and we're going to shake people down, and I don't like that. And I really think that we have a problem with sustainable paths, continuous paths, and we look at it without going to small business owners and saying, we'd like to pass this problem on to you, and so when you come forward with your life savings and you want to make a dream go, we're going to tap into you to take care of problems that somebody else created before you showed up on the scene. It's not right. And that's, again, we can go all night, and I'm sure I'll get a lecture about kids and blind people traversing sidewalk and fields and all that, but it's not true. This guy had a business in the middle of nothing. He made a go of it, and now we want to go deeper into his pocket for sidewalks when he said, I will put the sidewalk in when you put a subdivision next to me and there's foot traffic. That's a reasonable claim. He puts it in writing. He's obligated to it. To encumber him at the very most vulnerable moment as he's trying to create this business is a hardship that we shouldn't be in the business of creating. And we're not even going to put the sidewalk necessarily in front of his place. If we think it goes somewhere else, we'll take his money and think it goes somewhere else. That's what this ordinance allows, and it's wrong.
I take exception to two things. One is the term shakedown. That culture ended on November 17th, 2016. Not November 20th, November 17th. So that is ridiculous. This adds, you still have that option, Trustee Joseph. If you want a variance from XYZ builder on 26 Mile Washington or Hobart, where the development on either side is not going to be there for 20, 30, 40 years, that option is still available. The trying to put together the puzzle, why isn't there a sidewalk here? Why isn't there there? Why does this one have one? The new ones are easy. New homes get a sidewalk, unless of planning, they come for a variance through ZBA and here. Same program, same thing. It's the unique ones, might be 30 years to get a sidewalk. Now you got an agreement, that is going to be recorded. There's 6 owners, the bank owns it. Trying to go to court to have a 2,000 foot chunk of sidewalk based on an agreement, enforce that owner, which we're not talking about something 2 years down the road of the same owner. This is longevity with the property. This doesn't, the term shakedown really, I take extreme,
Please allow me to apologize.
I have huge issues with that, and this is, if anything, this is more transparent. Option A, option B. If somebody wants to say there's a very big exception to this general rule, then present a variance.
Mr. Supervisor, please allow me to apologize for using the word shakedown. It was inappropriate. Shouldn't have said it that way. This is without replowing the field. I stand by my original. I shouldn't have used that word because there is no attempt to it is better said that it is front-loading this individual with expenses that are not appropriate, in my opinion. So shakedown implies something completely different, and I'd like to withdraw. So, and I apologize.
They still have that same front-loaded now. This gives another option.
It was just an apology.
And what I would look forward to from the opposing members of this board, if you don't want a sidewalk ordinance, then put the ordinance in front that says you don't need sidewalks. If you don't want it to be in our engineering standards, then put that idea in front. What's in front of us is a small ad to try and fix a problem that we're seeing on the ground every day as we try to tackle sidewalk gaps throughout our community. Instead of making them worse with variances and with allowing this one and not that one and creating a problem decades down the road, this is a simple fix that will start solving the problem. Treasurer LaFata.
Well, basically, you're saying that there's options, but if somebody wants to opt out about putting money in a fund, you're saying it needs two boards to give them a variance to get that approval, which isn't an option. That doesn't mean they can just pick A, B, or C. It means that they have to go to two different boards and get two different approvals.
The piece of this you don't understand is they have to do that now. And they have.
I understand, and the thing is if somebody has a sidewalk and the sidewalk's in ill repair, we have ordinances where if they don't fix it, we can go in there and fix the sidewalk and we can put it on their tax assessment. So you're telling me that if somebody commits to put a sidewalk in and they don't do it, that we can't put that sidewalk in and do the same thing based on our ordinance, assess them for the sidewalk if there's sidewalks on both sides of them?
Maybe a question to bring up to our legal counsel, and maybe not at this board meeting.
The answer is yes, because we have an ordinance right now. If the sidewalk's in bad shape and it needs to be fixed, if the homeowner doesn't fix it or the property owner doesn't fix it, the township can go in there and assess their taxes and fix it.
What are you talking about repairing? Attorney Siebert, let's solve this right now. We got 2 miles of sidewalk gaps up 23 Mile Road, both sides. Can we put the sidewalk in and assess the property owners for that sidewalk under our current ordinances?
Well, why don't we change that ordinance to say yes?
Hey, you're participating. Good, let's do it.
Well, if the ordinance,
let's
start. If the ordinance requires during new construction, which is what you're talking about, a sidewalk be installed, you can require them to do it even if it goes to nowhere. But what you're doing is, I think, is you're making this ordinance exactly like the Washington Township ordinance. And that has been controversial as well. We have had developers. There was a gentleman who owned 4 large lots in a beautiful area, and it required that he put sidewalks in front of his property. There were wetlands in front of the property. The cost of building the sidewalk was somewhere in the area of the Zilwaukee Bridge, and the township board decided rather than compel you to spend $300,000 on 500 feet of sidewalk, that he could take a substantially smaller portion of that and he would donate it to a fund, and they took the money and they went 2 miles down the road and they put the sidewalk in front of God knows where, and they built it. And so they figured it's not going to be good here, we'll build it somewhere else. They have a policy where they want sidewalks all over the place because they want the township to be a walking pedestrian township. You know, these are policy issues. There's nothing new about the day-to-day. You can compel somebody to put it in. It's a legitimate governmental interest, but you're trying to address a situation in which you put in a sidewalk and you walk from one side of your lot to the other side of your lot because there's forest on both sides. So, you know, every community does it differently. Washington is in love with this ordinance, but periodically there's a case that comes up that's a tough one to decide.
Clerk Berry, then I'll go to Trustee Domingue.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. As I'm the maker of the motion to adopt the ordinance, I'd like to just briefly go over the reasons for my support and why I think it's a good thing. I think that for a long time, Chesterfield Township developed in somewhat of a patchwork quilt or haphazard fashion. This ordinance will streamline some things. It will give another option. Instead of having agreements and judgments and all this sort of thing all over the place, this kind of helps to corral some of those issues into one or another option for people. As far as, so I think it's a a smart thing to do. I think it's a wise thing to do. And I also think it's a very progressive and forward-thinking thing to do because we are thinking ahead. We are trying to get, allow a mechanism, in my mind, to make sure that the infrastructure in terms of the sidewalks and all of the other public things that the public's going to access, that we have at least a plan to get those things in place. Right now, we don't. And we can't apply for grant funding, and there's a couple of other things that the township cannot do because we don't have a mechanism. This will give us another option, another mechanism. As is pointed out, and I agree, that if there is a developer that has a concern, significant hardship, some reason why they oppose the ordinance, they can apply for a variance to this ordinance, just like they can apply for a variance to any other ordinances. The last issue that I'd like to address or share with the board in terms of my own personal experience, I don't know if any other board members have been business owners. I was a business owner for over 10 years, and we did building and we did development in terms of our businesses that we had. So we built buildings and had to deal with some of these issues and a lot of other governmental, municipal, and state regulations and red tape and all of that, and I'm very sensitive to that. I've been a small business owner, and I've had to deal with those things. But in this case, this isn't something I would consider unreasonable. I'm sensitive to it, but I also know that if this is something that's going to break someone, I think they probably need to reevaluate their business plan, because this is something that you just consider it a cost of doing business. And I don't consider it I don't consider it to be overly burdensome, except perhaps in the case that, Attorney Siebert pointed out, where you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars and you have special circumstances. But again, that can be considered by one of the various boards or commissions on a variance. That's exactly the type of, an example of the type of situation that could occur where we would consider a variance. But for the most part, I don't see this overly burdensome on small business. Again, I did it for 10 years and dealt with many of those things. If I did, although I'm sensitive to it, if I did, I would certainly not be supporting this, but I don't believe it is, and I think it's the right way to go for the township moving forward.
Thank you. Trustee Domingo.
There's been a lot of discussion on this, and I think it needs to be more redefined, and I think we need to table it.
Motion to table by Trustee Domingo.
Support.
Motion by Trustee Domingo, support by...
There's too much going on in this. There needs to be a lot more discussion.
We need a date.
Yep.
2 or 3 meetings.
Pick a date.
Make it
Second. We have 2 meetings every month. One, first or second in October, first second in November.
Go November. First meeting in November.
To November 7th. First meeting in November, which
The first meeting in November.
motion to table to the first meeting in November by Trustee Domingo, support by Trustee Joseph. Discussion. Treasurer or discussion on the motion to table.
I just think there needs to be more looking at this from different ways, because even if you do, I understand it's going to fill in the gaps, but if you do go to ZBA, it's going to cost them money in ZBA. They got to apply for the ZBA fees. So
it's just on the motion to table, but that's exactly what happens right now. So yes, apparently I will have Jonathan, Gary, and the entire team, along with our consultant, circle back around. We have a motion to postpone until the first meeting in November. Yep. Just on the motion to postpone.
Yeah, on the motion to postpone.
My statement on the motion to postpone is I am opposed the motion to postpone. Any further board comment?
On the motion to postpone, in terms of what we look for during the time of the motion to postpone, your suggestion on the remedy, it should also be inclusive, because the mechanism that is currently available.
Just on the try to stay just to the timing.
Well, if I could just
because I'll go back to the topic.
No, I understand, but you answered his question erroneously, and that's not what you said wasn't true. And I'd just like to correct the record. So, a point of clarification, Mr. Supervisor, and that is, the individual does not have to come back for an additional variance. The mechanism for the property owner, in the case what Mr. Gandanella pointed out, was that the plan was approved conditional upon the sidewalk. So there was no additional bureaucratic roundabout to get on. There was no cul-de-sac of bureaucracy that he just kept going on. He was approved, his plan was approved, and the condition of the approval was that he put the sidewalks in when the residents showed up. So there was no additional variance required.
It came to this board. That item came to this board.
But the question was,
That's the
the
variance.
question
Started with
the question was no
plan.
variance, correct. There was no variance
There was.
separate
This
hearing.
board had a variance on that project.
This board approved the motion to approve the site plan with a condition.
We'll hammer that out while it's
Great.
tabled, if it's tabled. Any
Perfect.
further comments on the motion to table? Motion by trustee Demink, support by trustee Joseph to table item 8C. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
No.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Motion prevails. Item 8D, approve, motion to table prevails. Approve the recommendation by Supervisor's Office to reappoint Wendy Jones to the Zoning Board of Appeals with a term ending September 2022. I'll make a motion to approve.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by trustee Anderson. Discussion. Comments from the public?
I was just waiting to be
Trustee
recognized in
Joseph.
discussion. I would just like to thank Ms. Jones for your continued service. I have had the pleasure of serving with you on the ZBA, as has the supporter of the motion, and the appreciation for your service to the township is well known and well respected. So thank you for your volunteer work, and I'm glad that you've decided to stay with us.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board?
And I'll say,
Trustee Anderson.
I'll second that. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by trustee Anderson to approve item 8D as written. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Motion prevails. Welcome aboard again. 8E, request approval to pay High Tech Systems Service, Inc. for IT network support until November 30th, 2019 for $16,057.05 from GL 101-265-934. Do I have a motion?
Support.
Motion by trustee Joseph. Oh, I'm sorry, treasurer LaFata.
Support.
Support by trustee Anderson. Discussion. Comments from the public? Oh, trustee
I
Vosberg.
have a question. The reason it's just the 1 month is because there's an RFP or something that's coming out from the QBS team?
Yes, we currently have bidded the contract out. Bids closed last week. We'll give the QBS team enough time to review all bids, make recommendations to the board, and also to continue projects we have going on.
Okay. My concern was that enough time, but I guess if it's not, we can always extend it if we need to. Or they
Either the treasurer or the deputy treasurer, that would be good for them if it's full time.
Correct. Right now, we pay them on a quarterly basis. If there isn't enough time, we can come back to the board and ask them for a continuation. But right now, this is just for the next quarter.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Motion by treasurer LaFata, support by trustee Anderson to approve item 8E as read. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Motion passes. 8F, approve a request by the Department of Public Safety to upgrade the computer-aided dispatch records management system and mobile software systems from Tyler Technology in the amount of $309,313.60 from GL 295-301-970 and 205-301-801. Do I have
So
a
moved.
motion? Motion by trustee Joseph.
Support.
Support by trustee Anderson. Director Kirsten.
This request is an upgrade to our CAD records management mobile software that we use in the 911 and also in the police department. This package was bought, or this software was bought back in 2005. We operated on flawlessly. This is obviously with technology. There's improvements, upgrades, efficiencies within the software that they now operate on or presented to us to upgrade. Along with the upgrade of the technology side, the software side, we'll have to increase our hardware capabilities. So that's the original request, one of the requests added in on this on the hardware side. It's again, we've had it since 2005. This is all technology based. The system that dispatches our police cars, our fire trucks, and the bus to the city of Baltimore, communicates sensitive messages, returns from Secretary of State, and then on the dispatcher side, it houses all the original call information, and on the records management side, all of our cases, all of our contacts, all of our internal police work is managed within this software package.
Trustee Deming.
Tyler is the old new world, correct?
Yes.
Now,
Could you repeat that, Trustee Demick?
Tyler is the old new world.
Thank you.
The only question I have, because I knew we had the older system here at Chesterfield, so going with this new system, will this be the same system that Clinton, the county, Sterling, and everybody else has got? So now you guys can all interface if somebody goes down? Because I know
that is one of the technical goals that we are going to achieve once this is done.
Because I know, like, we here were old school, and then county and everybody else had new stuff, and now just switched to the Tyler name and everything else, because I know your guys are talking to my guys in Sterling, and things are different, so now everybody's gonna be able to interface.
Yes, we will have an interface with contact with the county dispatch center, along with connections with all.
And you really couldn't do that before?
Correct.
Okay.
And it works both ways. There's some efficiencies that we are bringing to bear.
Okay, all right, that's why I figured was going on here, but, okay.
And again, the implementation of the CMS, this is going to be a slow process. This is going to be an arduous task. We have to do a follow-up.
Is this, are we paying them all up front, or is this over in allotments?
It's over a 5-year period stretch, but there is an upfront payment this year.
Okay.
Our annual service agreement is around $88,000. We've upped it. I put the payment schedule in the package for you.
Trustee Joseph, then Trustee Vosper.
Just a quick question, Chief, with regard to the system. It does our record management, the computer-aided dispatch, as well as the mobile in-vehicle software systems. I know that you're big on redundancies, and there is a separate dispatch center in case of an emergency. There is an alternate location. So does this funding provide you with enough revenue to upgrade the redundant site as well?
Yes, this is a complete system-wide improvement and upgrade. And yes, we do have a redundant dispatch center and fire station on 20-year model. That is included in this process. That we wouldn't upgrade one without.
Excellent.
Again, this is a system-wide technological upgrade.
Thanks, Chief.
Trustee Clerkberry. Trustee Vosper.
Does this require a budget amendment? There's nothing listed here under.
If this is approved, I'm going to sit down with the vendor. We're going to create a project timeline. The hope is that because it's 12 months, I would like to push it into the new budget year after January, depending on their staffing level. Again, that conversation, if it happens this year and this is approved and we begin producing product, yes, there will be a budget amendment request to make that final goal.
Okay, thank you.
Clerkberry.
Thank you. I just want to thank the Public Safety Director for bringing this forward. The technological advancements that across the board in government are not only desired but necessary now in the new world, if you will. No pun intended, but Clerk's Department will also be bringing forward a technological records management upgrade to the board shortly as well, because we're in the same boat as public safety as well, trying to keep up with what the requirements are, various, and just for best operational purposes. So I'm thankful that you're doing this, because that records management component being updated and maintained is critically important. And I want to thank you for bringing this forward. I'm not thrilled with the cost, but it's a cost of doing business that we need to take care of, and you'll have my support on this item. Thank you.
Just a side note on the cost. If you recall, originally when we entered in with Tyler, it was New World at the time. We spent nearly $400,000 to go from a paper system into a computer-based system. In 2005, it took us almost 18 months to transition. I couldn't be happier with where we are now, but obviously the technology's improving.
Absolutely.
Treasurer LaFato, then I would go up to the public.
Actually, with this system, if Comtech goes down again like it did a few weeks back, you could probably help them out and take on the burden.
Yes, there's benefits to doing this. We have cooperation both ways, and we have offered our services to that entity, and should this ever happen.
Actually, it's an improvement for the township, and it's protection for
Yes, absolutely.
at the same time.
That is a great point.
Let's bring it up to the, to the public. You got one right behind you, Director. 3 minutes, Mr. Miller.
Here we go again, ladies and gentlemen. Some time ago, I went to see that man, and he was in a police uniform at a police station in a warehouse, which I helped pay for in the past 50 years. And he was spending $400,000 on a piece of paper like this at that time, or something close to that amount. Now we're only $300,000. What time will you be in your office tomorrow? So I can come and find out where Tyler, who is this Tyler Technology? Is he here tonight? Let's hear from Tyler. How about a list of the stuff that Tyler's furnishing me as a citizen? I just paid my taxes across the hall. I want to know where Tyler is, because I want to talk to Tyler now. I've talked to him twice. Why don't we just sell that old police station? Let all the police officers work for the county. Do what some of the other townships do. And just get rid of all those Tyler Technology materials. I can't go. Alright? Talk about another $100,000, but I have to wait on that until we hear this year minutes. Now, your brother's comment.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Relating to this item only. But only related to item 8F, the computer-aided dispatch management. Hello.
You all know who I am, Elizabeth Cole, and I'm here just to congratulate the village of Chesterfield, fix the building, and our...
Only on this item. This item only. We're only discussing this item right now. The public comments will be at the end. No, okay, thank you. Any further comments on item 8F? Down in the front, Mr. Miller. On 8F, the public safety upgrade to the computer-aided dispatch records management system. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Meadow. I'm here on another issue, but I'm hearing the gentleman discuss what's going on. Recently, my mom and I, we were traveling on M59, and there was a very large industrial truck that was breaking the traffic lights at M59. This was in the Macomb Township area. My mom and I happened to follow them. They turned on to Gratiot. There was the point to the story. And they traveled into Chesterfield. I came to the police station. I had pictures. My mom took pictures for me on my phone of who actually broke the lights, what they did. It was a large industrial item, and it broke multiple lights. So to support our police, they needed the technology to interact with Clinton Township, Macomb Township. This was a real safety issue. And if we don't have this upgrade, $300,000 is not a lot of money for upgrading for, let's say, it's CAD, records management, and mobile in-vehicle software systems. Honestly, that's not a lot of money
Please address the board in your comments.
This is not expensive, and I do agree that you guys should definitely pass this. This is something we need.
Thank you.
Especially for the 911 system.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public on item 8F? Any further discussion from the board or last minute thoughts, Director? A motion by Trustee Joseph, support by Trustee Anderson to approve item 8F as written and read. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item 8G, approve a request by the Elections Department to enter into a facility use agreement for the new polling location between Faith Christian Center and the Charter Township of Chesterfield for the years 2020 through 2025.
Motion to approve as stated.
Motion by Clerk Berry.
Support.
Support by Trustee Vosberg. Discussion. Questions for the clerk? Trustee Anderson?
No question.
Any- Motion by Clerk Berry.
Go ahead.
Support by Trustee Vosberg. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye. 8H, to approve a request by the Elections Department to change the date of the regular Township Board meeting from November 5th, 2019 to November 7th, 2019.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Anderson,
Second.
supported by Clerk Berry. Maybe a 2-second explanation as to why, Clerk Berry? There's an election?
Correct. There's an election that's being held on that day that was not scheduled at the time that we set our calendar and was not anticipated. So now this is a polling location for that election in this room, in fact, and we are in need of that to accommodate the election.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion by Trustee Anderson, support by Clerk Berry. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye. Motion passes. There, item number 9 is addendum, and there are no addendum. Item number 10, public comment. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes and state your name and address for the record. Now you're up.
Okay, guys, I'm just here to thank everyone here at the Chesterfield Township Board, our senior fire group as a whole. We are in the north end of the building. After one of my requests for admittance into the senior center, we were having some difficulty with one of the building departments. It was either Jonathan Palin or Gary the Master came up and said, you know, I've got this big space at the end of the north end of the building, and he said, you're welcome to it. And I said, oh no, thank you so much, but we really want to get into this senior center. So, thank you to Daniel and he did get us into the senior center, but our schedules didn't work out with them, and so I had a occasion to meet with Steve Duchesne, and I told him about the office we didn't have, and he was kind enough to clean up the room, put us in there. We've got tables, we've got chairs, we've got storage. We are just as happy as could be. So thank you to all of you that supported our little effort to make this our community project. And we're very, very pleased with everyone that helped us to with all these people that helped out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Colleen Bell, and I am here about the Bayside Commons tree preservation plan. I have contacted the township numerous times. I have asked to be on the agenda for the planning meeting, and I was not put on that. I asked to be put on the agenda for this meeting, and nobody told me the process. I found out what this is from my neighbor, and I'm surprised. I'm very dismayed at this point. What has gone on is I've been contacting the township on 5 separate occasions. Bayside Commons is being built behind my home. I have filed a complaint with the township. I've also filed a this tree preservation plan starts with the state of Michigan, the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, approves this plan. Then it goes to the state of Michigan and Chesterfield Township. So Chesterfield Township had an inspector out on the site the entire time. This gentleman was with the builders. He looked like an employee. He has never once worn a badge and identification. The builder has come into my yard. I know this for a fact. I watched them with a shovel, and one of the employees was jumping into my neighbor's yard. They have trespassed. They don't care. And I have been told very repeatedly, well, we're going to protect the trees now. The problem I have is there's a large tree. Here's my fence. Here's a 60-foot tree, and the builder has dug all the way around it, has not followed the tree plan. I've been told by code enforcement and by planning commission, the planning board I came to see could do nothing for me. They were all volunteers. I did not know that, but I was able to talk to Trustee Joseph. He was very helpful, and I can read off the dates to you that I came to the township. I have received very little help. I've been told to sue. Let's see, Friday the 16th, where I originally I just came out to my yard to find a group of contractors leaning over my fence, discussing it very intently, just hanging out there. So I went out and I said, gentlemen, what can I help you with? Oh, we're going to take down this fence. We've got to reach the water drain. So I'm like, oh, no, hold on a minute. You don't get to come out here willy-nilly. This is not communist China, and take out our fences. Well, then the township employee who was not identified by state law should be identified, and was not. And he said, oh, I'm with the city, and your fence is on the easement. I'm like, hold on a minute. What are you talking about? No, it's not. Long story short, they gave my neighbor 1 hour when they took out his fence. And I'm sorry, what are you people being paid for? 1 hour. Let me come to your house. Let me come in and do whatever I want to your property. They came in and they flagged the property. You know what? That's fine. You need to do that. You need to reach the draining easement. That's perfectly fine. I've been completely ignored by this board. I was told to get an attorney. At this point, I am so disgusted. I have contacted Fox News about all of you because nobody but Trustee Joseph cared. I know for a fact our Supervisor Acciavatti was on the emails. I know Cindy Berry was on the emails. And you know what? You people have not helped me. This contractor has been allowed to go willy-nilly and do whatever he wants. The problem is this 60-foot tree on the back of my property. I was told by the water department, if that tree dies, and I have pictures of dead branches already. If that tree dies, guess who's stuck with the bill? I am and the new homeowner. From the edge of my fence to the next foundation is 35 feet. They're digging right in the roots, and they're not supposed to be. I have pictures. I have video of them. First off, township employees need to identify themselves. They have never once knocked on the door. My mother
Elena, about 30 seconds left for the 5 minutes.
What I want to know is anyone going to help me? I did discuss this with Trustee Joseph, and he did say he would contact some people. I've been waiting to see if anything is going to happen. And what I would like is I would like the tree removed. That's what I want to happen, because this tree is going to fall on my house.
You had your own timer. That's perfect. We'll do the best we can during public comment, and you can always give my office a call at any time. We can explain that to you either after of how items get on the agenda. Thank you so much. Any further comments from the public?
been noticing a problem with how the water department is operating and what they're operating on for the last 3 years since the new administration came in. Prior to that, as part of the water rate board, basically the department established that they're going to start replacing certain water lines that were aged, and even ones that weren't aged but definitely needed replacement, basically the one at 23 Meadow. There was also a study done that cost, I think, around $1 million, going through all the sewer lines and classifying the sewer lines, what was wrong with them, and when they should be taken apart or replaced. None of that has been done in 3 years. However, we've taken on other things that basically wasn't part of the administration to do. You've added 1,300 feet of water line, a main sewer line, from the subdivision to an empty area that hopefully somebody will start developing it, but nobody has, and usually the developer has to pay for something like that. The attorney even acknowledged that should happen. Yet we paid $250,000 to have that done. There's other things happening that just doesn't make any sense. The other thing is, the last meeting, you said that you took on the responsibility for all the water and sewer lines being not only the main lines going to, but the main lines going from the building, all of the different buildings in the VA home being developed. And basically at that point, you assumed responsibility for the support and care and replacement of those lines down the road. Now, unless you're going to leave a check when you decide you're not going to be here anymore, you're going to stick the township with that. And I don't see why that was necessary or what it is doing, why we're doing it. What I'm proposing that you set up a board, a water commission board, like you have. You've got a zoning board, you've got a planning commission, you've got the board of appeals, that these things be, this board would work with the water department, set up what they're supposed to work on. Any other interest that is wanted should come through them. They would work with the water department, decide whether it's in their interest, whether it's in their, they should be doing it. And then, if it is, then let those decisions come to the board. But it seems that everything is being channeled as to what you want, and there's not a lot of rhyme and reason for what you want. Supervisor, some of it I think is political. In fact, most of it's probably political. But it's not being responsible to the citizens of this township. Please put this on the agenda, work with it beforehand, see where we can go with it.
Thank you so much. Any further comments from the public?
Yes, sir.
Didn't even have a nerve to talk to the treasurer. He said, duty
Thank you.
Good evening. Gary McMahon, it's 29082 Big Point Drive. I am the neighbor of those homes right there. And I have to attest to the large oak tree that's been compromised. It was originally on the back. The building plan is being tree protected. That never was established. The tree protections there. The whole root system has been compromised. Given the right kind of wind, it's not going to affect the property. It's also going to affect land. The disappointing thing is I came to the planning side of the building and asked who, what, where, when I can talk to, and, well, we don't know, that's not our jurisdiction. Well, who can I talk to? We don't know. We're just not enforcement. Okay. Well, you can sue, which seems kind of a, I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm in customer service, and that's the option I've got, is I can bring litigation? Is that what the township board wants to engage in and pay for in long range rather than problem solve? I just didn't find that answer really quite helpful, I think, to make Schaefer's more. As far as the assessment or easement in my property for the drainage, yeah, it was rather short notice. I'm afraid if I had not been there, how I would have been notified. That was never clear. The person representing the Public Works Department sort of identified himself, but he looked like one of the ladies. He said he was, but had no real identity. He was speaking on behalf of the Public Works. So just some notes going forward to consider as we address this ongoing situation. At least I don't agree that we not a detrimental to the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Let's bring it up to the board. Trustee Anderson.
Withhold my comments at this time.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'll just take them in order. Ms. Bell, I owe you an apology for this
We
reason.
don't talk to, excuse, point of order.
Yes.
Under the new approved rules, we do not,
Where are the new rules?
we approved them in the minutes tonight.
Approved at the last minute.
We'll give you a little bit of latitude here, and then we'll address it at the next
I
meeting.
probably shouldn't have interrupted. I didn't hear the point of order. What was the problem?
Addressing individuals by name from this podium. Was that correct?
Correct.
Trustee?
Okay, I have customarily tried to answer the questions from the, so maybe I misunderstood the rules. Are we not to answer the questions according to the new rules? Is that the assertion here?
That we don't, yes, that we do not address the public per se by name.
Oh, okay,
There are
no
some,
problem.
there are some things that can just be easily addressed, but if, excuse me, I have the floor right now. And that's all. I just heard you start naming names and things like that.
Look, I'd like to address the first speaker, and I'll address it to you, Mr. Chairman. When the individual came forward to get relief from her problem, she approached the Planning Commission. She was under the impression that she was on the agenda. The Planning Commission had basically concluded their business for the evening, and the resident was upset and frustrated that they didn't have an opportunity to, get resolution to their problem. The Planning Commission members indicated that Mr. Joseph is our board liaison and he would be happy to help you, and I was, and so I spoke with the individual. The complaint that was laid out was similar to what we heard tonight, and the email that I sent to the entire board as a follow-up to that was responded to immediately by Mr. DeMasters in our planning department, or sorry, DP building, thank you. And the relief that was proposed was a conversation with the developer, and the developer had agreed to bring out a professional arborist, and the arborist is going to be tasked with looking at the sort of root system and to make a determination about whether or not this tree can be saved. It was an equitable remedy, in my opinion, and I was under the impression that the plan moving forward would have been communicated to the residents. So I guess I'll offer my apology to you, Ms. Vosberg, and then we can tell her after. I don't know how to do it in accordance with the rules, but I felt like a bit remiss in not communicating that that plan. I was under the impression it would be communicated by township staff. It's difficult for me. I do not work in the township from 8:30 to 5. I have a full-time job, and so any resident that I contact during the day is usually before or after my start time or during my lunch break, and so that leaves not great customer service. I'm not a full-time board employee, and I was under the impression that the arborist plan would have been communicated to the resident. The concern about what happens if the tree falls down and 2 years down the road, I think was easily remedied with a suggestion that Mr. DeMasters afforded, which is let's get the arborist's opinion, and then we can look at what relief needs to be made. The developer is a very reasonable individual. I think he's known in the community as being very accommodating when requests are made that are felt to be reasonable, and he assured me that in this instance the arborist would be the determining factor. If there is a belief that the structure, the root structure has been damaged so that the tree is in question, he'll take it down. If there's ambivalence, I believe there may be some discussion among the board for perhaps a bond for later. We'll, I think, review that once the arborist weighs in and we have an opinion on the structure of the tree. So again, the apology for not communicating that to you, but that is the status. Secondly, the issue involving agenda items coming to the board, I will always try to accommodate a resident with a specific request, and the general feeling is that the issue needs to have something that requires board action. So if it is simply a discussion, then the agenda, I believe, affords people the opportunity to come forward and present whatever it is that they have under public comments. If there's a specific action requested that requires a board vote, at that point I think it is incumbent upon board members to bring those issues forward for a full debate. In the handout that was passed out, I agree with a number of things that were communicated in this correspondence. And I think, ironically, the conversation that I was able to have with Supervisor Acciavatti regarding a couple of these issues is something that I think there's room for agreement on. I do believe that discussions specifically about particular vendors, there is a process in place that affords us the opportunity to remedy this in a good way. So I'm troubled by a number of the things that are laid out, but I'm also encouraged by some of the communication that I've had this past week in terms of a remedy for that. I don't believe customer service includes litigation. I don't know really how to address specifically that because I assume there's probably not too many people that are going to say, I told them to sue. So, of course, that's not the remedy that we would like to see in this particular case, since both speakers were addressing the same issue. In the email that I sent to my fellow board members, as you all received, had the complaint specific to the identification of the employee. I was also concerned about a policy that involves our workers entering property without sufficient notice, and the issue involving the Second Amendment and possible issues out there. I did include Mr. DeShane in that for review. He is our HR director, and I've asked him to sort of weigh in on some of those concerns because I do think that they are potentially problematic. The gratitude from the Chesterfield planners is very welcome news, and I'm glad that they have a home. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Trustee Demink?
I'm good tonight.
Trustee Vosberg?
Thank you. I'd like to, again, congratulate the 3 young men that were here tonight and their other friends that helped find the person that was committing crimes in their neighborhood. I just think I can't say enough about the attitude of people engaging in their community, making it a better place. And also thank you to Faith Christian Church for sharing their facilities for the public good for a new polling location. I think that's great that they step forward at no cost to the township. I appreciate that. And my last one is SEMCOG, Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, is ramping up their classes and workshops again for this fall. And I know many of you are on the mailing list. I just encourage you to take a look at some of them. And I'm trying to see if they're of interest to people I know, I'm forwarding them to them as well. Thank you. Treasurer
LaFata.
I'd like to congratulate Ms. Jones on her appointment. On the tree issue, there's ordinances, and internal to the township, there's management responsibilities, there's responsibility for fulfillment of your job descriptions, and then there's accountability. I don't think we practice those very well in this instance. I read the tree ordinance myself. It specifically states that it should be staked, how close the stake should be, and everything else. I think the township needs to assume some responsibility. If there's an ordinance in place, it needs to enforce it or it needs to change it. But it needs to be enforced. You don't turn your head. It seems like it doesn't matter whether it's an APO or a policy or an ordinance. A lot of times we change them and then we don't follow them anyway. It's just whatever's convenient at this point in time. And I see it internal to the township, and it's an issue that it needs to be dealt with. But it all comes down to management responsibility and accountability. And those internal to the township to get elected by the voters are the ones that are responsible to fulfill this. Thank you.
Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'd just like to, because it's come up twice tonight, just go over with board members, and I know everyone knows this, but also for the benefit of the public can hear us have this conversation, with regards to how to get items on a board meeting agenda. I'd just like to read very briefly from our board rules, and these haven't changed. They were newly adopted, but this provision didn't change. Under Section 4, Meeting Agenda, regular meeting agenda, the township clerk shall prepare the agenda of business for all regularly scheduled township board meetings. Any other board member or representative of township committees, boards, or commissions, or citizens with the support of not less than 2 board members desiring to place a matter on the agenda shall notify the clerk by such item by 12 noon, 7 days preceding the next regular meeting. Such requests must be submitted through the clerk's office. All supporting documents pertaining to such agenda items shall also be given to the clerk along with the notice. Payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department for board approval must also be received by the clerk by this time in order to receive consideration. Items that the clerk does not receive by the stated deadline shall not be considered by the board except upon the majority consent of the members present. For the purpose of this section, the term specific board action shall mean a determination, action, vote, or disposition upon a motion, proposal, recommendation, resolution, order, ordinance, or measure on which a vote by members of the board is required and by which the board effectuates and or formulates public policy. So where any member of this board, as you all know, can submit an item for consideration, the internal process is such that it comes into the clerk's office, the clerk reviews it for completeness and timeliness, and then it is approved by the clerk's department as well as approved by the supervisor's office as well. Once that is done, it's then put on the board meeting agenda. If there is an individual that's, or a board or commission, or an individual that is a member of one of our boards or commissions, or a citizen issues must have the support of not less than 2 board members. So in that case, if there is a citizen who comes to one of us and would like an item on the agenda, then either one of the 2 supporting board members can prepare the agenda item, indicate which 2 board members are sponsoring that item, and then submit it to the clerk's department with all the appropriate documentation. So that's how the process will work. My concern tonight that I heard is that the process was not effectually communicated to a resident. That is an issue that I have a serious concern about, and that's going to be remedied tomorrow. One of the things that I'm going to do is take this particular provision, even though it is put on our website, it's a bit difficult to find. We're going to take that and put that front and center on our webpage, on the clerk's department page, so that there will be a link and there will also be the language there so that a resident can see exactly how they need to go about getting an agenda item on the in front of the board for consideration. And I'm also going to have a discussion with my staff as well and direct them how to assist residents with that particular request. So those were my concerns tonight, and that's the action that I plan to take tomorrow, and hopefully remedy that situation so that never occurs again. Thank you.
Thank you. Approaching 3 years into the term of this board, and some reoccurring issues come up. Trash, by far the #1 call volume and concern and outright anger issue that we have. Lots of focus on that. Lots of never-ending trying to improve that service. Issue #2, by call volume, roads. And lots and lots of time spent on roads. Issue #3, sidewalks, and the ridiculous condition of our non-motorized paths, and the unbelievably unfortunate lack of safety in our township, decades and decades behind. You know what issue #4 is? Trees. Private property disputes relating to trees. Every single kind that you can imagine. Some that got cut down and they didn't want to get cut down. Some that should be cut down when they want cut down. Some that fall on people's houses from private property. I spend a lot of time with legal counsel. What tools do we have? One private property owner, another private property owner, a tree falls, a tree's got an issue, it's hanging over. Time and time again, the answers are your tools are limited. If there's an easement there, and these come up constantly, and I mean to the tune of 20 a month. Generally, they get solved very professionally. Generally, they get solved very, very well, and afterwards, I will circle around with you. Our planning department and our construction observation folks with DPW. Yes, there's always some issues when a development goes behind your home. It happened in every the new subdivisions, even the one that you're in. When that was developed back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of issues, maybe where former treasurer Hartman lived, that butted up to that new subdivision with all those issues. So those professionalism issues shouldn't happen and need to be addressed. The team is very solid here. The process is on all those 4 I just named, and there's a bunch more out there. There's outliers. But the point is that issue with trees, it's not easily solvable, because you're dealing with private property issues, you're dealing with a tree ordinance that is an ordinance, and I only named 4 issues and they're big. All of those need work to change, and I feel like I'm doing it all alone at times. And you see it here on this board from a big chunk of the member. So those are the big 4 issues. I will be knocking on your door, mister. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to do this. Gavel myself. David, you can gavel me.
Oh, I thought it was perfectly acceptable. I appreciate you answering this question.
And I will be taking a little more care into that exact situation, but we had limited tools, and I look forward to meeting with you. We do have a closed session tonight to 12A, discussion regarding strategy and negotiation pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act, and 12B, consultant with attorney regarding trial or settlement in connection with specific pending litigation in the matter of Lamar Advertising of Michigan, Inc. versus Charter Township of Chesterfield, Macomb County Circuit Court, docket number 20190035560-CZ, pursuant to Section 8E of the Open Meetings Act. Do I have a motion to enter closed session?
Motion to enter.
Motion by Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Joseph to enter closed session. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee DeBink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye. We are in closed session at 9:24 PM. Do I have a motion to re-enter open session?
Motion to re-enter open session.
Motion by Clerk Barry, support by Trustee Joseph to re-enter open session. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye. We do have an action item coming out of closed session. I will make a motion to direct a township attorney to sign the consent agreement in the matter of Lamar Advertising, Michigan versus the Charter Township of Chesterfield, Circuit Court Docket number 2019-003560-CZ.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Acciavatti, support by Trustee Joseph. Discussion. Comments from the public. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Acciavatti.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Motion passes. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Trustee Demink, support by Trustee Vosberg to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by saying nay. We are